Welcome to True Tears Stories. Please like this video and subscribe to True Tears Stories. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The ornament was small, handmade, and hung near the back of the tree, carefully placed, as if someone hoped it wouldn't be noticed. But Daniel noticed. It was always the same tradition, ever since he could remember. A new ornament every Christmas, shaped like a tree, decorated with names written in gold ink. Each member of the family given their own tiny branch. It used to hang near the front, where the light touched it. This year, it didn't have his name. Not on any branch. Not even the back. Daniel stood still in his mother's living room, blinking under the glow of the soft white lights. A cinnamon-scented candle burned nearby, and Bing Crosby played from a speaker tucked behind the couch. Everything else looked the same. His mother's knitted snowman collection stood on the mantel. The same plaid runner sat on the dining table. The framed photo of his sister Rachel's wedding still commanded the wall over the stairs, but the ornament had changed. He leaned in, tracing the lines of it with his eyes. There was Rachel, her husband Dean, their two kids, Max and Lily, each with their own glittered branch. His mother and stepfather, Paul, were there too. Even Rachel's golden retriever, Baxter, had a tiny bone-shaped tag dangling from a side twig, "No Daniel." Behind him, his mother's voice drifted in from the kitchen. "Danny, can you help me bring out the cranberry sauce?" Danny, not Daniel, the nickname she used when she was trying to sound affectionate but distracted. He stepped back from the tree. His mouth was dry. "Coming," he said. In the kitchen, everything smelled like nostalgia, turkey, rosemary, that artificial vanilla she always poured into every dessert like it could fix things. His mother wore her green apron that read Gravy Queen, hair pinned back the same way it always had been. She smiled when he walked in. "Grab those spoons, would you?" He obeyed in silence, placing them beside the porcelain serving dishes. "So," she said, as she stirred something on the stove, "Rachel's kids have been asking about you. Lily wants to know why you live so far away." He forced a polite chuckle. "She's 8. She thinks anything outside of a 5-minute walk is too far." His mother smiled again, but didn't meet his eyes. Dinner went as it always did. Rachel arrived late, but was forgiven instantly. Dean told the same stories with new details, polishing his father-in-law charm. Max and Lily played with the gift bows under the table, while the adults traded anecdotes that included Daniel only when someone remembered. He barely ate. It wasn't the food. It was the weight of not belonging, of being extra. After dessert, while everyone else buzzed with wine and warmth, Daniel slipped back into the living room. The tree glowed softly, unaware of its treason. He looked at the ornament again. His fingers hovered over it. Why? He heard footsteps behind him and turned to find his mother. She held a glass of wine and wore that smile again, the one she gave guests and telemarketers. "I saw you looking," she said lightly, like it was a joke. He didn't laugh. "I wasn't included." "Oh, Daniel, it's just a silly ornament." "No, it's not." She sighed. "Rachel made that one with the kids. I think they just did the people they see the most. You know how children are." He tilted his head. "Max is 9. He didn't sketch a symmetrical family tree and hot glue it together without help. She hesitated, and in that moment he saw it, guilt flickering beneath the surface of her calm. "You're being dramatic," she said. There it was, the verdict, as familiar as her perfume. He stepped closer. "You replaced me with a dog." Her expression shifted, the way clouds move in front of the sun, not fast, but complete. "You don't call," she said softly now. "You don't come home for months. Rachel's here every weekend. Her kids know us. Dean helps Paul with the taxes. What do you expect, Daniel?" "I expect not to be erased." Silence stretched between them like pulled thread. She took a sip of her wine. "It's not that serious." It was, but she would never see it that way. Daniel turned and walked to the coat rack. "Where are you going?" she asked. "For air," he said. She didn't follow. Outside, the cold hit him like a slap. The air smelled of chimney smoke and pine. Across the street, a house blinked with red and green lights, synchronized to some cheerful tune. He pulled out his phone, stared at the screen. There was a message from someone he hadn't expected to hear from again. "Still want the truth? I found something." He stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, he typed, "Send it." Behind him, the warm glow of the house pulsed in the window, wrapping everything in soft lies. But something colder had settled in his chest. Not bitterness, not even anger. Clarity. If they didn't want him in the family tree, maybe that was because they were clinging to the wrong version of the story. He was done clinging. Daniel didn't go back inside right away. He stayed in the car with the engine off, watching his own breath fog up the windshield. The message sat heavy in his pocket, like it had weight, a name, and a time. That's all it had taken for his stomach to tighten and his heart to begin tapping out a warning. "Still want the truth? I found something." It came from a number he hadn't saved but recognized immediately. Nora, his father's old friend. A woman his mother had always referred to as that librarian, like she was accusing her of something unspeakable. Daniel had barely spoken to Nora in years. After his dad's funeral, she'd hugged him too tightly and whispered, "If you ever want to talk, you know where I am." At the time, he'd thought it was just one of those soft, meaningless things people say when they don't know what else to offer. Now, he wondered if she'd meant it literally. The phone buzzed again. A file attachment this time. He clicked. A scan of a birth certificate. His own name. His birthday. But the father's name listed wasn't Paul Reynolds. His mother's current husband. It wasn't even his late dad, David Langston. It was someone else entirely. A name he didn't recognize. His throat closed up. He opened the second attachment, a photo of an old letter, handwritten, dated 2 months before his birth. It was addressed to his mother. "I understand if you don't want to keep my name involved, but I need to know if you'll tell him. Please, Annette. He deserves to know who he is." Annette, his mother. He closed the file. The car was quiet except for his own breath and the tick of the cooling engine. They had erased him from the family tree, but maybe the roots had been poisoned long before. When he finally walked back toward the house, he didn't go inside. Instead, he stepped left through the lighted gate into the backyard. The place looked the same. Paul's grill tucked under its cover, the rusted wind chime still hanging by the fence, the old magnolia tree rising like a keeper of secrets. He used to play back here with Rachel. Used to think this yard was the safest place in the world. Now, it just looked like a stage set. From inside, he heard laughter, Rachel's voice rising over the rest, warm and smooth, the kind of voice that always fit in. Daniel felt something cold and hard in his gut. Not jealousy. He'd outgrown that. It was more like resignation. He turned toward the old garden shed. It hadn't been opened in years, but he knew the key was still taped beneath the eaves. Inside, dust swirled in the narrow beam of his phone flashlight. Old boxes, deflated basketballs, a broken hose reel, and on the shelf, a metal box. It had belonged to his father. David Langston had been quiet, thoughtful, a man who wrote more than he spoke. He kept letters and postcards, even if they were short. Daniel remembered once asking him why he held on to things that didn't say much. Because silence means something too, his father had replied. Daniel opened the box. Inside, old receipts, a pocket knife, a worn Polaroid of a young woman, not his mother. And at the very bottom, a folded piece of paper, creased with age. It was a copy of the same letter Nora had sent. His father had known, or at least suspected. Daniel sat back on his heels. The shed smelled of earth and rust. Why hadn't his father said anything? Why had he kept the lie alive for so long? He thought of all the times he'd questioned why he was different, why he looked nothing like Rachel, why he was treated like a guest in his own family. He had always thought he just wasn't enough. Now, he saw it differently. They hadn't included him in the family tree, not because he didn't belong, but because part of them feared the truth of where he did. When he walked back inside, no one noticed he'd been gone. He moved through the living room quietly. Max and Lily were watching a holiday movie, draped in blankets. Paul had fallen asleep in his recliner. Rachel and Dean were washing dishes in the kitchen, laughing over something he didn't catch. His mother was alone in the dining room, rearranging the centerpiece. He stepped into the doorway and said her name. "Mom." She turned, startled. "I found it," he said. Her face didn't change. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. Her shoulders rose slightly, as if preparing for a blow. "I wanted to tell you." "When?" She looked down. "When you were old enough to understand." "I'm 33. Annette swallowed. "I thought it would confuse things. Your father loved you. He raised you. That's what mattered." Daniel took a step closer. Did he know? She nodded slowly. "He found the letter. He never confronted me about it. He just chose to keep things as they were." "And Rachel?" "No. No one else knows." Daniel let the silence press against them both. He thought of the ornament again, of the carefully curated tree, with its glittered lies and ribbon-wrapped omissions. Maybe the truth didn't fit into a holiday tradition, but it still deserved to be spoken. "I'm bringing someone to Christmas tomorrow," he said. His mother's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "You'll see." He didn't say it to be cruel. He said it because he was done protecting their version of things. Let them feel the quiet unravel for once. The next morning, the house buzzed with its usual Christmas rhythm. Rachel's kids shrieking over gifts, Dean faking excitement for another sweater, Paul fiddling with the thermostat like it was an ancient riddle. The scent of cinnamon rolls drifted through the air, masking something far more pungent underneath. Dread. Daniel wasn't there yet. He hadn't stayed the night, despite his mother's vague offer of the guest room. The truth was, he didn't want to sleep under the roof that had held so many secrets, especially now that he knew how deep they went. Instead, he woke in a quiet hotel room, the blinds half open, the December light muted and gray. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the truth still echoing inside him. That name on the birth certificate, the letter his father never sent, the fact that Rachel still didn't know they weren't full siblings, and the person waiting downstairs in the lobby. Daniel checked the time. 11:30. It was almost cruel to show up late, but cruelty wasn't the point. Truth was. He straightened his collar in the mirror, glanced at the envelope again, tucked neatly in his coat pocket. It wasn't for him this time. It was for her. 20 minutes later, he pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same, but his gaze had changed. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was a performance stage. And today, he was going off script. He rang the doorbell. His mother answered. Her face froze, and for a second, it seemed like she forgot how to speak. "Hi, Mom," he said calmly. "This is Mark." Mark, mid-50s, wore a charcoal coat and a nervous smile. Salt and pepper hair, eyes a touch too familiar. His voice, when he finally extended a hand, was soft and deliberate. "It's good to meet you, Annette." Rachel appeared behind her mother, her arms full of tissue paper. "Who's this?" Daniel didn't answer. He didn't need to. The resemblance was subtle, but it was there. In the curve of Daniel's mouth, in the shape of his chin. Rachel's eyes darted between them, the gears already turning. "Mark is my biological father," Daniel said. The silence that followed could have folded time in half. His mother stepped back slowly, her hand still on the door, fingers trembling just slightly. "Daniel, you didn't—" "I asked for the truth," he said, "and I got it." Rachel's jaw moved, but no sound came out. Behind her, Paul rose from his recliner, instinctively moving toward the tension, like he could diffuse it by simply being present. Daniel turned to Rachel, pulled the envelope from his coat, and held it out. "Read it when you're ready. It explains everything. I thought you had a right to know, too." She didn't take your receipt and take it, just stared at it like it was a grenade. Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't come to cause trouble," he said, voice tight. "I came because my son asked me to, that's all." Paul looked at Annette. "What is he talking about?" Annette sat down without answering. Daniel stepped inside. He didn't ask for permission. "I'm not here to scream. I'm not here to make anyone feel bad, but I am done pretending I was ever part of something I clearly wasn't." "Daniel, that's not fair," Rachel started. "Isn't it?" He turned to her. "You made that tree ornament with your kids. Left my name off it. Why?" I didn't mean to exclude you. I thought you wouldn't care." "I cared. I've always cared." His voice didn't rise, but the force of it landed. "You all made me feel like a footnote in my own family, and now I understand why." Annette finally spoke, her voice fragile. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to lose you. Your father, David, he raised you like his own. I thought that was enough." "It could have been," Daniel said, "if you'd told the truth. But you chose silence. You chose secrecy." No one spoke. Even the kids, now standing in the hallway, seemed to sense something had shifted. Something important. Mark broke the quiet. "Daniel just wanted to meet me. That's it. He wanted to put the pieces together. Daniel nodded. And now that I have, I needed you all to see it too. He didn't expect apologies. He didn't need them. What he needed was acknowledgement, not just of the facts, but of the space he'd always been forced to occupy. Not quite in, not quite out. He placed the envelope on the table, beside a plate of untouched cookies. This is the last time I walk into this house without being seen for who I actually am. Rachel blinked hard. What do you want from us? I want you to stop pretending I was always part of the picture, he said. You left me off the tree. Maybe now I know why. Maybe it wasn't just about forgetting. Maybe somewhere inside you always knew I didn't belong. Annette rose slowly, tears in her eyes. You do belong. You're my son. He met her gaze, but not his, and that truth changes everything. He looked at Mark, then back at the stunned circle of family who had for so long loved him with conditions he hadn't known existed. This year, he said quietly, I brought the real family tree. Mark didn't stay long. After the awkward standoff, in the living room, dissolved into brittle silence and tight-lipped avoidance, he quietly asked Daniel if he wanted to get some air. Daniel nodded. Neither of them needed to say that his presence had done its job. Outside, the light was fading, the sky turning the color of watered-down ink. Daniel leaned against the hood of his car, while Mark stood a few feet away, his hands buried deep in his coat pockets. You sure you're okay? Mark asked. Daniel nodded. I needed them to see it, not to accept it, just to see it. Mark looked down at the driveway gravel. You're braver than I was. I wanted to be there when you were born. Your mother, she made it clear I wasn't part of the plan. Daniel had expected to feel anger, but mostly there was just a hollow kind of peace, like a storm that had passed through and taken all the furniture with it. I used to think I didn't fit because of something I did wrong, he said, voice low. Now I see I was just never the version of me they wanted. Mark finally looked up. That doesn't mean you weren't enough. Daniel exhaled, white breath rising into the cold. I think I believed them for a long time. Even after Dad died, I kept waiting for them to fold me back in. Like maybe I'd earn it, somehow. Did you? No, he said, but I stopped needing to. Mark smiled, quiet and small. That's something. They shook hands before parting, awkward but sincere. Daniel watched him drive away, taillights vanishing like the end of a chapter that had taken too long to begin. When he stepped back inside, the house felt dimmer. Someone had turned off the music. The kids were upstairs. Rachel was in the kitchen, wiping the same spot on the counter over and over, like she could scrub away what had been said. Paul sat in the recliner again, as if still deciding whether to speak. Annette was standing by the window, arms crossed over her chest like she was holding something in. I wasn't trying to punish you, she said, without turning around. I know. I was trying to keep things simple. But the truth isn't simple, Mom. And I was never asking for perfect. I was just asking for honest. She turned then, eyes tired and rimmed with red. He didn't fight for you, not the way David did. Daniel stepped closer. Maybe he didn't have the chance. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You've made your point. You've made sure everyone sees me as the villain. That's not what this was about. No? She shook her head. Then why bring him? Why humiliate me in front of my husband, my daughter? Daniel's voice was quiet. Because I was already humiliated. You just didn't see it. Every time you acted like I was too much, or not enough. Every Christmas, I was the extra plate. And this year, I didn't even make the tree. She winced. Rachel made that. And you didn't correct her. Silence again. Daniel looked down at his hands, then back up. You all wanted a neat story. You built it together. But it wasn't true. And I had to walk around inside that lie like it was my coat every day. I loved you, she whispered. I believe you, he said. But I don't think you ever saw me. He could have stayed longer, could have sat down, eaten the food, pretended the conversation had never happened. But that would have been returning to the lie. So instead, he picked up his coat, nodded once to Rachel, who watched him from the hallway with a look he couldn't quite read, and walked to the door. Where will you go? Annette asks us. Softly, he paused. Someplace I'm not a ghost. Then he stepped outside. The cold hit him again, crisp and real. And for once, it felt like it belonged. He didn't know what came next. If Mark would want to stay in his life. If Rachel would ever speak to him again. If his mother would ever forgive him for bringing the truth into the light where it couldn't be rearranged. But those were questions for another season. For now, he had reclaimed something he hadn't even realized he'd lost. His name, his story, his place. Not on their tree, but in his own roots. Later, in the quiet of his apartment, Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee and left the lights low. He didn't turn on music, didn't check his phone. He just sat by the window, watching the city move quietly below. There was no rush to fill the silence. The family he thought he knew would go on, reshaping the story to survive the fracture. Maybe they'd say he overreacted. Maybe they'd say he was always distant. Maybe they'd forget his version altogether. But the truth no longer needed to be believed by others to be valid. It had been said. He pulled out the envelope Rachel hadn't taken and set it down on the table beside him. He didn't know if she'd ever read it. Maybe it didn't matter. He sipped his coffee, letting it warm his throat. Outside, someone walked by, laughing. A real laugh, unrehearsed. It didn't sting, it just passed. Daniel closed his eyes and let the feeling settle. Not anger, not regret, just stillness, and the quiet beginning of something unbroken.